On to the top focus at this hour. UK-based radical preacher Anjem Choudary has been convicted for directing a group banned under UK terror laws. Choudary faces life in prison after he was pronounced guilty for encouraging support of the Al-Muhajirun terror group online. As per the UK police, Anjem Choudary was one of the original 3 members of the Al-Muhajirun and was still acting as its leader as late as July 2023. Prosecutors have told the court that in one of his online speeches, he viewed the extremist label as a medallion. The police have also arrested him last year, but he's been convicted now.
Anjem Choudary and the banned group Al-Muhajirun have been involved in radicalising young people here in the UK and overseas for many years. Anjem Choudary has now been convicted of Section 56 of the Terrorism Act offence of directing a terrorist organisation, and the hope is that he spends a considerable amount of time in prison. This represents a significant disruption to Anjem Choudary and ALM and an increase in public safety here in the UK and overseas. This has only been possible thanks to collaboration between CT Policing and MI5 here in the UK, and in this case, of course, our colleagues in the NYPD and the Royal Canadian Mounted Police in Canada.
The terrorist organisation he was directing, Al-Muhajirun, was founded in the UK in 1996. It was first banned by the UK government in 2006 when it was operating under a different name. The group allegedly spent years recruiting others to its extremist cause of establishing Sharia across the world. UK police says that around 600 people have been linked to the proscribed terror group over the years. In fact, an undated video of Anjem Choudary is doing the rounds on the internet, where he's calling for bringing the world under the thumb of Muslims in Sharia.
The whole world one day, my dear brothers, will be under the Sharia, including Hackney and Walthamstow and Moscow and New York, all of the country, inshallah, under the thumb of the Muslims, under the authority of the Ummah. We have a very bright future, my dear Muslims. It is not orange, it is La ilaha illallah, Muhammadan Rasulullah.
Anjem Choudary had also gained notoriety for his controversial hate rants in the wake of violence in UK's Leicester in August and September of 2022. He allegedly made instigating remarks and even called for retaliation. A post on his website also, he wrote about if anyone attacks you, retaliate. Blaming Prime Minister Modi for violence, Anjem wrote that it was Hindutva ideology, quote-unquote fascist ideology, that was responsible for these attacks that were taking place. He's also reported to have asked the Hindus to convert to Islam, going forward to make many such controversial remarks about Indian politics as well. Let's take this across to Bhavtosh Singh. Bhavtosh, here is a person whose remarks have, many believe, played a role as far as the riotous situation we saw in Leicester in 2022. And also what's very interesting is that it's been an international investigation. The US, Canada, etc. all have worked together with the Metropolitan Police to piece together the pieces of this entire puzzle. Take us through what the investigators have shared so far.
Madhav, as far as this investigation is concerned, it's a joint operation of UK police as well as undercover operators from New York Police Department as well as from RCPM. Remember, he was offering online classes which were being carried out by Islamic Thinkers Society, and these online classes were for youngsters and individuals who were being radicalized, and Anjem was in fact one of the individuals who were giving these classes. Now, Anjem Choudary was in fact released on bail. His sentence was suspended, and as soon as his sentence was suspended, he again joined Islamic Thinkers Society and was again in fact trying to foment trouble. And in this undercover operation, it was found that at least 300 individuals had joined these online classes. In 2022, he was in fact again arrested, and his trial lasted for around 6 weeks, and then he was yesterday convicted. Now, why his arrest is important is for simple reason. He was one of the most influential radical preacher, and as far as radical preachers are concerned, he was one of the most important online influencers, and his arrest in fact sends a very strong signals that such individuals should be put behind bars. He in fact denied all these charges, but as Metropolitan Police spokesperson said that they had ample evidence against him, and his arrest will send a very strong signal.
All right, thanks so much, Bhavtosh, for joining us with this breaking story. Let's quickly open this up and take this across to our guest for the moment. With us at the moment is Brahma Chelani, strategic affairs expert. We also have Adit Kothari, founding member of the Indic Society. David Atherton, journalist and broadcaster from the United Kingdom, is joining us. Let me come to you first. David Atherton, we heard a lot about the role that this individual has played in various reports that have been put out, as far as the incidents, the unfortunate incidents that took place in Leicester. And the very fact that he's now been arrested on terror charges perhaps goes to show that there are those individuals who are trying to spread, violence in the United Kingdom. And of course, the multiple statements and the fact that he has referred to Indian politicians as well, has raised a lot of concern here in India. How are you looking at the way things are panning out? Because it's not just been the Metropolitan Police, but also police from across the world, agencies from across the world, United States and United Kingdom as well, who played a role in this particular arrest.
Well, indeed, he was recruiting people worldwide, and you make a reference to Leicester there. He's directly or indirectly responsible for the deaths of 22 people in the Manchester Arena in 2017. Salman Abedi blew himself up with a bomb at a children's concert for Ariana Grande. He also was the inspiration for the murder of Soldier Lee Rigby in Woolwich in 2017, 2016, I think it was. And they're both serving life imprisonment, one without the chance of parole, and one with a minimum sentence of 45 years. This guy has fomented hate and violence throughout Britain throughout his life. He was jailed in 2016 for 5.5 years for being a member of the prescribed organisation. He's due to be sentenced on the 30th of July. If he doesn't get a life sentence without parole, I'd be most surprised. It's about time this filth was finally put in prison for good and out of harm's way from the good people of Britain and the world.
Right. Let me bring in Brahma Chelani on that road. Brahma Chelani, here's an individual whose, several of his remarks are completely unprintable. We can't even put them out because they're so full of hate against particular communities. But the larger point is this. The larger point is that, here are persons who are actively involved, openly involved in the spread of violence in these kind of incidents, and their links with various terror organizations, as has been this particular case where Anjem Choudary has now had to face the music, perhaps making a case for the links between, those who pretend to be working for social organizations at the end of the day also are very actively working along with terror groups.
You're right, absolutely. But the bigger question is, why is the UK providing sanctuary to such elements? This conviction was a result of joint investigations by British, Canadian, and American authorities. Now, if you look at the record of the US, UK, and Canada, they have provided refuge to terrorist elements from different parts of the world, including from India. In the 1980s, an Indian diplomat was killed in Birmingham by a Kashmiri terrorist. And in the 1980s, from Canada, we had the Sikh terrorist blow up in Air India jetliner, killing all 329 people on board. The question is, have these governments now, these countries, have they learned the lesson? If you look at Canada's record or UK's record, it doesn't appear that they have learned a lesson from their mistakes in the past. The reason why this Islamist preacher, Anjem Choudary, was able to operate with impunity for so many years from British soil is because the British establishment has allowed such elements to operate with impunity for a long time. This is something we should not
Very
forget.
quickly, there's also a guy called Abu Hamza who's serving life without parole, and he was allowed to get away with his hate preaching for years and years and years. It was only when the Americans asked for his extradition did he finally face justice. We're cowards in this country. We don't want an Islamic uprising in this country. That's what is behind it.
Absolutely. And let me quickly bring in Adit Kothari as well. Adit Kothari is a founding member of the Indic Society. Adit Kothari, there were all sorts of heated exchanges, there were all sorts of narratives that were put forth. But, do you think that with this particular conviction, at least some of the false narratives that were put forth will now be set to rest?
Yeah, so when it comes to the Leicester riots, I think, yes, you're quite right. We've seen Margaret Freeman, who was also indicted, a couple of weeks ago. And now following that, we have Anjem Choudary also now being thrown away into a dark pit, hopefully from where there is absolutely no return. But it poses a larger question. I think Mr. Chilani made a very valuable point as to why is the UK essentially put themselves into this situation? Why have we created so many Frankensteins, hoping that, we can pander to them and they become a sort of a weapon for the state where we can where we can use them at our whims and fancies against other nations. We made the case of Ravindra Matre, who was brutally executed in 1984, and following which, even last year, we've had Khalistani extremists, vandalizing the Indian High Commission, which is absolutely under any UN law that should have been taken up very strongly by the government, which wasn't the case. So there is some room that the UK government has shown where they are willing to tolerate extremists or individuals harboring very sort of extremist ideologies who want to use democracy, who want to use the values of democracy against democracy. However, I think this sentencing in itself is quite significant because it somewhere disrupts the radicalizer at a root level rather than, looking at an organizational level, something which I think India did very well with its PFI and, the National Democratic Front. So what happens is these organizations keep changing their names from time and time again. And what happens is the perpetrators or the people who actually radicalize young youth get away scot-free because people like Anjem Choudary, who's a trained solicitor, he knows all the loopholes of the trade. He knows the law at the back of the hand, which is why he's able to preempt situations when the government's coming for the organization. So they are able to change the name of the organization itself and then masquerade around the different organization and then operate absolutely freely. So I think this is where this points towards a tactical change, which the three governments working across seamlessly, borderlessly in this information age have been able to do really
Very quickly, Brahma Chilani, are there any lessons for India in this?
Well, a couple of lessons. First is that we need to stop politicizing the global war on terrorism. The global war on terrorism stands derailed largely because it's been politicized. We need to bring that to an end so that a concerted and sustained international onslaught on the perverted ideology of radical Islam can begin. After all, the only way to defeat an enemy driven by a pernicious ideology is to discredit that ideology. And we haven't begun that effort. We haven't made that attempt to discredit the Islamist ideology. Even if we kill the number of terrorists or eliminate a number of groups, the fact is, as long as this ideology remains credible in the eyes of its adherents, that ideology has not been discredited widely, then we will continue to face this problem. So I think we need to, it's not just India, it's a global issue. We need to focus on discrediting this ideology. After all, let's not forget that the West won the Cold War, not so much by military means as by spreading the ideas of freedom and capitalism that helped suck the lifeblood out of communism's international appeal, thereby making it incapable of meeting the widespread popular yearning for a better, more open life in the world. That was an aspiration of people across the world. And it was an ideological victory, not a military victory.
All right.
So similarly, I think on the global war on terror, we need to focus on the ideology.
Well, some very interesting lessons there, certainly, and very interesting thoughts as well. Brahma Chilani, Adit Kothari, David Atherton, I'd like to thank all three of you gentlemen for joining us this evening.